Hey Peppermint Patty group. So we're back for another lesson, and this one is totally optional. So if you want to follow along with me and read our book today, I would love that. But you do not have to do that. If you need to get caught up on some other work, then that's totally fine. But we are going to read a book today called A World of Worms. We're going to do things a little differently. Our lesson's going to be a little bit shorter this week. So we're not going to do any word work. We are just going to focus on our book this week, okay? So we're going to read our book in just a few minutes, but just make sure that you are in a comfortable place. If you want to get something to drink, maybe do that. And then we'll go ahead and get started with our book, okay? All right, guys, so even though we are not doing a word work, we are still going to do all of our other normal things that we do. So we are going to kind of plan for our writing after we get done reading our book, because remember, strong readers like to write about what they read. So that's what we're going to do in just a few minutes. But what we're going to talk about today is what are some facts that you either already know or maybe that you learn about worms, about earthworms. So what you're going to do, don't worry about writing this part yet, okay? I kind of got ahead of myself when I'm making this, and I probably shouldn't have written this quite yet. So just ignore this part for right now. But what I want you to do is grab a notebook or grab a piece of paper, and I want you to go ahead and make this T chart. Okay, we call it a T chart because it looks like a lowercase t. And then on one side, you're gonna write a K, and that stands for know, like what I already know about earthworms. And then you're gonna write an L on the other side. So that's like what you learn from reading our book about earthworms. And then once you do that, don't forget to write a title at the top. That way you know what you're jotting notes down about. So go ahead and write worms or earthworms up at the top. And then that way when you are writing the notes, then you don't have to write in a complete sentence because you know that you're talking about earthworms or worms, okay? So once you get this chart made, again, don't worry about this, but once you get this chart made, then you can go ahead and press play again and we'll get started. And we'll get started reading and writing down those facts that we learned. All right, so now let's talk about before we read. So we're gonna pause the video in just a second, and before you actually start reading some of the book, we're gonna write down what we already know. What is our background knowledge about worms? Background knowledge just means like, what do we know before we even start learning about it? So I want you to pause the video in just a second, and I want you to write down what you already know about earthworms. Now I wrote down that they help the soil and plants, but I don't even need to put it in a complete sentence because these are just notes that I'm jotting down to help me when I go to write later. So, and I already put what it's about up here in the title. So I don't have to say earthworms help the plants or the soil and plants. I don't have to write it in a complete sentence. So I just did a little dash. I like to call it a dash fact. I did a little dash and then just wrote down what I already knew about worms. So I want you to take a second and do that. If you don't know anything about worms, that's okay, but I want you to try to see if you can think of at least one thing that you already know about worms. I bet you know at least one good fact about earthworms, okay? If anything, I gave you one. So write down something that you already know, pause the video, and then when you're ready, you can press play, and then we'll go ahead and start reading our book, okay? And as you're reading, you're gonna write down some things that you learned about earthworms as you read. Or if you wanna do it at the end, then you can do that too, okay? All right, let's go ahead and start reading. All right, so our book that we're gonna read today is called A World of Worms. And this is a book about earthworms, and we're gonna learn about where they live and how they help plants and other animals. So like I said before, you should already have and I apologize if this wasn't showing the whole way, that word, but hopefully you have already had a chance to make your chart, your T chart. And then what you're gonna do as you're reading is you're gonna make little dash facts, just like we did over here with our dash. So we're gonna do a dash, and then you don't have to put it in a complete sentence. You can just jot down some things that you learned as you read. Now, if it's better for you to read all the way through and then go back and write down what you learned, you can do it that way too, whatever is best for you. But we're gonna kind of plan And then when we're done reading, we will work on our writing, okay? I'll tell you what you're going to do for that. And we're still doing a vocab word, so I'll pop in and talk about that as you read. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys, so let's talk about our vocabulary word. So our vocabulary word is this word right here that's in bold print, and it's the word burrows. That's how you say that. And remember, we've talked for a while now about using context clues. So that's using the picture, reading the text around that word to see if we can figure out what that word means all on our own. Sometimes the glossary will help too. And actually in this book, because it's in bold print and it's an informational book, it's probably going to be in the glossary. So you could use that too. But let's try to figure it out just by using the pictures and the text. So if I read it, it says earthworms make tunnels through the soil called burrows. So that tells me right there that burrows means what? Tunnels that go through the soil. So the text tells us what the word means. We don't even need the pictures or the glossary, but of course those would be helpful. But even if we just read the text, it tells us what that word means. So when you all go to Seesaw, make sure that you use those context clues to kind of help you figure out what that word means. I kind of helped you out a little bit, but you can always go back to this page and use those context clues all on your own, okay? All right, let's go ahead and keep reading. All right, you guys. Well, I hope that you enjoyed learning about earthworms and maybe you learned something new that you didn't know before you read the book. But now we're going to write about what we read. So we're going to take our notes. Hopefully you had a chance to jot down some things that you learned as you were reading, or if you didn't, pause the video and then go ahead and do that now, okay? And then when you're ready, you can press play. But now we're going to write about what we read. So we're going to write, I want you to write at least 3 facts that you know about earthworms. It could be something that you already knew, or it could be something new that you learned when you were reading the book, okay? But when we jotted down our notes, we didn't worry about writing incomplete sentences. We just did like a quick little dash fact. But now that we're actually putting it into writing, we want it to make sense. So we want it to be in a complete sentence. So now that I'm actually doing my writing, I can't just write help the soil and plants because that doesn't make sense. What helps the soil and plants? So now I have to add some more words in there to make it make sense and make it a complete sentence. So when I go to do my writing, and I'm just going to write on top of this line right here, but I'm going to take this piece of information, this little dash fact that I already knew, and I'm going to put it in a complete sentence by saying, earthworms help the plants or the soil and plants, okay? And then all that does, that one word, puts it into a complete sentence. So I'm going to take this dash fact and I'm going to write earthworms help the soil and plants. Period on the end. So now I've taken this little quick dash fact and now I've put it into a complete sentence, and somebody that hasn't seen this and didn't read our book, they could read my sentence and they would know what I mean. They would learn something from that. That's a fact about earthworms. So you're going to do that 3 times. You're going to give me 3 facts. So 3 sentences that you learned or something you already knew about earthworms, okay? You could always do more than that if you want to, but just at least 3 sentences, at least 3 facts. Don't forget to do your vocabulary organizer and upload a picture of your writing on Seesaw, okay? All right, great job today, you guys. I hope you had fun learning about earthworms.